All right, welcome back. This time we're going to talk about psychoanalysis as therapy and theory. Last time we talked about anxiety and defense mechanisms and gave you a ton of vocab. So let's put that vocab to work just a bit. All right, so psychoanalysis is like as a therapy and as a route towards understanding is a thing. The idea is to resolve problems by bringing unconscious conflict to the surface so that the ego can deal with them. The stuff that's like below the surface, so the preconscious, is like potentially bubbling, and so therapy is a way to like bring that up as well as go deep into the unconscious and bring that up to the preconscious and then up to the conscious. Conscious. My mouth is just, I can't do that vowel combo. It's really irksome. Anyway, so it takes a lot of time, and the issues can be painful, but with therapy, they can be dealt with logically as well as emotionally and addressed. And in the long run, the idea is that like by working with a trained professional, you're comforted through that process and guided by a therapist with whom they have an emotional bond. You build a therapeutic alliance. I don't know why this is the alliance symbol, but it is. The alliance. I have to keep myself entertained. Through that, the power of that alliance is worked with through transference, and transference is this tendency to bring ways of thinking and feelings and behavings that are developed as a response to one important relationship. So like the classic Freudian one is like, tell me about your mother, with a different person. So working through those feelings with the therapist to resolve whatever the underlying issue is rather than with the actual person, because usually you can't, because childhood you just couldn't cope is the thinking. All right. So there's lots of criticisms of this approach. It's got a super low cure rate, like super low, so it's not very effective. And it takes forever, both in terms of in terms of treatment. Like, so you're there for like years and years and years. And some more recent research has showed that long-term. Sorry, my show notes are telling me recent research showed that long-term psychotherapy is more effective than shorter treatments, but there's a return on investment here. So I have to figure out what the hell's happening with my show notes. But yeah. So shorter treatments less effective. However, like talk therapy as an approach is pretty effective. But there is kind of a law of diminishing returns. But that's one approach. So that's like the therapy side. There's also the like humanities side is like an intellectual, like almost a literary theory. Psychoanalysis can be used as a tool to understand human nature and culture, like a lens through which to view texts. Like the psychoanalysis, like the people that use the psychoanalytic approach in research, they're not in psychology. They're in like the humanities, critical gender studies, American studies, like philosophy, maybe a little not really cognitive science. They're much more qualitative. So, but here's some more critique. You've learned from me now that I love to critique because it's fun. So here's the big thing. It is excessively complex. So in psychology, we make a trade-off between parsimony and fit, or like complexity. And the general parsimony is simplicity, like the simplest explanation and the simplest theories preferred to more like nuanced, complex one, if they make equally good predictions. And so Freudian is just like overwhelmingly complex. and it's hard to like actually, and it's got an issue with falsifiability. And in general, the theories are based on introspection and insight from very specific cases. Essentially, it uses the case study method as its only like approach. And as we learned about way back in the like a billion years ago, so module 2, the case method is helpful, but it can be really unrepresentative. And that's actually probably what happens with a lot of Freudian stuff. Again, Freudian, not the right way. Freudians. So it's hard to evaluate when you have theory that's not based on scientific observation. There's also a high likelihood of bias. So the therapist may influence what the client says, or bias may affect the interpretation of what is said. And in psychoanalysis, the definitions are super duper vague. You'll notice that I've tried to, as best I can, give definitions, but they're pretty vague. They're like mental energy, and the definitions have changed over time. And they're not really defined operationally. And so what I mean by operationally is these are operations or procedures used to identify or measure the construct. So even like a scale, or making some systematic way to get data out of that definition. Like psychic energy, how do you measure it? I have no idea. I jokingly talked about calories. That's the closest thing I can think of. But obviously, they're not doing calories because that's how much energy it takes to boil, to like convert water to gas or steam at like 1 pound of it. I'm not a chemist, but that's an operational definition where it's a specific amount of energy needed to go from one state to another. We don't have that in psychoanalysis. I really want that. I would love that. Like if we can operationalize psychic energy and measure it, oh, that'd be cool. Because then we could like test and see how much energy is left at each stage. Those are really helpful for scientists to be able to like evaluate the evidence. But because it's based on case theory for the most part and it's fuzzy, the definitions are fuzzy at best, it's damn near impossible to assign values or like to assign like numbers to concepts. So we can't like test them empirically. So, and I kind of hinted at this already, it's untestable. So you need hypotheses that are, that can be falsifiable. You need to have a null and alternative hypothesis, like that there is no relationship or that there is. And in Freud, we can't because there are many theories that can't be proven false. Or that either interpretation is evidence. So it may remind you a bit of evolutionary psych. And that recollection, that similarity is one that I feel. And that's actually one reason why they're kind of next to each other. So yeah, also sex is a big thing in this chunk of. So Freud thought women had less self-esteem, less creativity, less morality, and spent most of their lives trying to come to terms with the fact that they're not male. And it's this idea that women are aberrations or deviations from the male model, while in reality, like the default seems to be woman unless they have that SRY gene. So, like, that's the big, like, that's the genetic signal. And the SRY gene is typically on the Y chromosome, but, like, it can get flipped over. And so, you can, if you don't have the SRY gene, you'll look female. You'll do, like, the default is actually female, which I think is awesome and totally, is a problem under Freudian theory. Because it's actually the men that are deviations from the default model. But under Freud, a lot of these theories about women are about trying to come to terms with the fact that you don't have a penis. So much of this topic is all about women questing to come to terms with the fact that they don't have a penis. Yeah. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that I haven't talked more about the penis, because that is so big in Freud. I did kind of selectively edit so that, but there you go. You get some Freud, like, stuff in there. Like, there's even a phallic stage. Fun facts. Alright, so next time, and we're almost done, I promise, we're going to talk about why. Why study Freud? Why the hell do I include this unit? I talked about it a little at the beginning to try and explain why I include him instead of talking about more research methods, or talk about like the sixth factor, or talk about the self. There are deliberate choices I've had to make in this class, both in terms of this COVID semester or not. So why? That's where we're going to go. And, cool. Sorry, I'm almost at the time when the video runs out of, like the video cuts over. And I was hoping that it would just do it for me, so I didn't have to do it myself. It does not look like that's going to happen. Yay! So I'm going to just press the stop button.